Upanishadam bho bruhi yuktata Upanishad brahmim bhavata Upanishadam abrumeti.
So, teach the Upanishad. The Upanishad has been imparted to you. Verily, we have imparted the Upanishad of Brahman to you. At the end of however many mantras, however many parts and stories and explanations and clarifications and questions and answers, the student puts up his hand and says, "So please teach us the Upanishad." What teach you the Upanishad? I've just taught you the whole thing. The master doesn't react. The master doesn't. The master is neither disappointed. The master is neither frustrated, nor annoyed, nor upset, nor frustrated, nor angry. Why is that? No kartritva bhavana. Because there's no sense of doership. Kartritva bhavana is doership. That sense of, I am the doer. I am teaching the Upanishad. Why aren't they understanding? There's none of that. The guru has a role. He's been approached to teach the philosophy. And he does that with no egoistic sense of doership, nor karma phala hetu, no desire for the fruit of action. The guru would be a most miserable person if his happiness depended on how much the student is learning. I wonder if these guys are getting this or not. Sleepless nights the guru will have. I wonder if they're getting it. Are they getting it? Maybe they're not getting it. So the guru will have sleepless nights if he functions in that particular way. So guru remains cool. He understands his obligation. He understands what he needs to do. His role is to communicate these truths to the best of his ability. That also in the limitation of the language. Remember, we are speaking here. The Upanishadic guru is speaking about the highest, Brahman only. No other verses, mantras we are covering. And everything is about Brahman. So in that, even in that context, having to use language is difficult. And appreciate it's difficult. Yet he is attempting to communicate this highest philosophies to the student. Then the student turns around and says, "Can you teach it to us?" After he's taught it. It's cool. Objective. Cool. See, what is objectivity? Just being cool. That's it. Just be cool. Then you're objective. That person, have you seen? He's so cool. That means he's objective. Nothing bothers him. Why would it bother him? What's there to bother you? The only thing that bothers you is yourself. Your own issues. That's the only thing that bothers you. Guru is free from issues. So he remains a picture of objectivity. Even though this silly fellow is asking me to teach again. Sermon is over. Sermon is over. Yet we see it continue. So out of compassion, he understands. And there's a few reasons for this. So he wants to confirm that the lesson is over. Usually the style of the Upanishads is that they repeat the last line to show that the lesson is over. Upanishad has been imparted to you. We have imparted the Upanishad of Brahman to you. Upanishadam Brahmim Vavata Upanishadam Ma Brumeti. It's saying the same thing. It's saying, this is the style, I'm saying, of the Upanishads. The style of the Upanishads is they repeat the line to show that it's over. So he's confirmed that it's over. But he sees that the student is anxious to learn more, perhaps. This could be one of the reasons. Why the student asking again? It's finished now. He's asking again. So maybe he wants something extra here. Because otherwise you're wondering why he gives 2 more mantras after that. Perhaps he wants something more. So maybe he confides into that request and he says, okay, let me give a couple more tips. Little extras here for the student. Maybe he can get this.
तस्यैतपोदमः कर्मेति प्रतिष्ठा वेदाः सर्वाङ्गानि सत्यमायतनम्.
Tapaḥ, austerity, damaḥ, restraint, and karmaḥ, action, are its foundation. Vedas, knowledges, are all its limbs. Satyam, truth, is its abode. So, pratishtha, the foundation, angani, limbs, and ayatanam is the abode. So he gives all these 3 here in this mantra to the foundation, the limbs, and the abode of Brahman. So we'll take each one. So the foundation of Brahman rests in these 3. The pratishtha foundation of Brahman rests in tapaḥ, damaḥ, karmaḥ. Don't get too worried about the Sanskrit. Tapaḥ means austerity. What is austerity? Austerity is nothing but the practice of self-control. Remember, self-control is not self-denial. You do not deny anything. The senses have a natural tendency to run towards the sense objects of the world. Now, you'll appreciate that if you are consumed with the mere pursuit of sense objects through the senses, your capacity to pursue the higher is going to be severely constricted, restricted, impaired. And of course, if you're running after the senses, then how can you go after Brahman? It's like going in 2 different directions. The senses pertains to the world. Brahman pertains to the transcendental. So the first thing that you have to do is the intellect needs to exercise its control over the senses. In other words, it makes sure that the mind continues to remain withdrawn. And then you develop a sense of dispassion towards the world. It's, in a way, is like renunciation. This is tapaḥ, self-control. So it's nothing but the intellect controlling the senses. Oh, but I really want another piece. Is it okay with the intellect? Not okay. But I really want to do this. Is it merely just a desire? Or is it feasible? That the intellect must decide. So when the intellect participates in this equation of governing the senses, We call this as Tapaḥ. This is austerity. You're practicing austerity. Damaḥ, restraint. Very similar, but just a different level. So the mind in itself, it tends to get attached to the world, the attractions of the world. The attractions of the world pull the mind, and the mind goes towards it. This push and this pull. So the mind is attracted to the world. So in damaḥ, the intellect checks the mind, keeps the mind in check. If your intellect can control the mind, keep the mind in check, then you are practicing self-restraint, damaḥ. Karmaḥ, action. So again, when you have properly controlled the mind and senses through tapaḥ, damaḥ, then you really become available for action. See, if the intellect is controlling the mind, then whatever actions you perform are useful, productive. They're not being diluted into mere sensuality, mere materialism, any of those unproductive channels. When I say unproductive, in the sense that it detracts from your purpose of attaining moksha, of attaining enlightenment. So once the intellect controls the mind, then you're available for real action. You're able to perform your obligations and duties within the world effectively. See, the interesting thing is that to an extent, to a larger extent, I would say, most of us know what our obligations and duties are. We have a pretty clear idea. Sometimes, very seldom, it's not clear. But who can live up to the performance of those obligations? We have an obligation, first of all, to our own bodies, right? Body needs correct food. Body needs a certain amount of sleep. Body needs a certain amount of exercise, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into it too much. I'm sure you all know exactly what the body needs. So our obligation to the body is clear. But how many of us can actually fulfill that obligation? Even just to the body. We're not talking about mind here or even intellect. Even just to your own body, you have an obligation. How many of us can fulfill that obligation? This morning is very cold. I think winter is coming, must be coming. It's colder. I think I woke up this morning as maybe not today. Let me look at the weather. Where's my weather app? I think tomorrow looks like a better day. I think tomorrow is a better day to go for a walk. Not today. We know we should be, but we don't. Why? Because we're unable to control the mind, the senses. I know I shouldn't have that extra Easter egg. But, if I leave them all to the kids, their teeth are going to fall out. So I might as well eat it. But we've already had 3 today. Well, Easter is once a year, what's the big problem? You shouldn't, but you do. Anyway, a person who exercises tapaḥ and damaḥ understands their obligations and functions accordingly. Their intellect has pitched the ideal. The mind subscribes to that particular direction, and the actions are focused on the attainment of that ideal. In this case, the ideal is self-realization. Could be a relative ideal too. So these 3 foundations are the means to Brahman. Then he talks about the limbs of Brahman, Angani. Now, for those who don't know, it's all written in the introduction to the Upanishads. The Upanishad, I'm not going to get into it because you can read it there, it's all there. But the Vedas essentially are divided into these 4 Vedas. Rik, Sama, Yajur, Atharvana Veda. And Upanishads, there are Upanishads in each of those Vedas. So the Vedas are considered the original source of knowledge because they contain the Upanishad, the orthodox Upanishads. And these are said to be the first written expressions of Brahman. So the Vedas means knowledge, right? So these branches of knowledge, these limbs of knowledge, are supportive in us understanding the reality, the truth that exists. What is the world? The world is nothing but an experience for us. But what we must appreciate is that it is conditioned. You see, everything we know in the world is conditioned. All our awareness is conditioned. Are you aware? Aware of what? Aware of day, aware of night, aware of hunger, aware of coldness, aware, everything, aware. Conditioned awareness. Even the knowledge we possess is all conditioned. I have knowledge of medicine. I have knowledge of engineering. I have knowledge of the Upanishads. All our knowledge is conditioned. Similarly, consciousness. A human being is defined as a conditioned consciousness. Consciousness is conditioned. Conditioned by what? This body, mind, and intellect. So our entire existence is a conditioned awareness, conditioned knowledge, conditioned consciousness, which is merely an expression of the unconditioned awareness, unconditioned knowledge, unconditioned consciousness, or pure awareness, pure knowledge, pure consciousness. That is Brahman. So these conditionings that we are expressing are nothing but manifestations of that supreme unconditioned consciousness. See, remember we were talking pie, you remember the example about the light coming through the hole in the roof. The pure, we don't, in that warehouse, we don't see, we see the hole, we see the spot on the ground, but we don't see that light. In other words, we don't see the pure light. We can't understand the pure light. We can't understand pure knowledge, pure awareness, pure consciousness, the self. We can't understand it. So the next best thing is to attempt to understand it through its manifestations. Just like we discussed that light example. You can only understand the light when you raise up all the dust. Then you see the light, but it's not the light you're seeing, it's the reflection of those particles. I'm not going to go into the full explanation, but just to draw your attention towards that lecture. So these are the limbs. Then finally, he talks about the abode of Brahman. And the abode of Brahman is in Satyam. truth. Brahman resides in truth. What is this truth? Now we look at it from two perspectives. Right. A spiritual seeker needs to be true to himself or herself. You have to be true to yourself. So what does this being true to yourself mean? So from the first perspective, we talk about conviction. You see, in the famous words of Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. He's talking about the same thing. Satyam. Satyam is truth. To thine own self be true. And it must follow as night the day. For those of you Shakespeare aficionados out there. To thine own self be true. So what does it mean, being true to yourself? Being true to yourself means following your own conviction. This is the level of the gross intellect. You have a certain conviction that you have arrived at. Now, how you've arrived there, why you've arrived there, that's not the discussion here. We're assuming that the application of the gross intellect has caused you to arrive at a certain conviction. This is what I believe to be true. Follow that. Again, we're not talking about some concept you've just heard or dreamed up or believe might be true. A conviction requires a certain amount of effort and application on the part of the intellect, on the part of yourself, to arrive at a conclusion that you yourself must be 100% sure and comfortable with. See, that's why these discussions, group discussions and that are so useful. You believe everything is making sense until you got to explain yourself. And life is like that. No. This everyone is very opinionated until you have to explain your opinion. No. I read it somewhere. Somebody told me. Automatic disqualification. What conviction is that? You base your whole life on something somebody heard, some hearsay, something somebody said. I read it somewhere. Where? Magazine article. It must be true. So your conviction is flimsy. In other words, you're not living up to the principles of truth. You're not leading a truthful life. In other words, you better make sure that whatever you're following is based on a firm conviction. If you are leading a life based on a firm conviction, you've put that idea through the mill, tacked it this way, approached it that way, tested it out, seen if it works, seen where it doesn't work. You've done all that, and then you draw a conclusion. That is your conviction. Then your truth is relatively stable. So that's at the level of the gross intellect. Then he talks about that truth which pertains to the subtle intellect, which we call as conscience. So truth is represented at both gross and subtle levels. The gross level, defining what your conviction is, establishing, shall I say, your conviction and pursuing that. See, also what, before I move on to subtle intellect, also what you must appreciate in terms of your conviction is it's not something that is static. It's not that 18 years old, this is my conviction. See, if you have access to more information, you must be willing to adjust. Not at every thing somebody says this, but you got to take those things into consideration. So you're constantly evolving. It's not that this is my conviction, I'm not moving from here. That's it. It's not that. You are evolving. Your ideas will change as you evolve, as you gain higher and higher knowledge. Conscience, on the other hand, is that inner voice. It is always pointing you to in the right direction. It's like a north star, that magnetic north on the compass, that guiding force. Some people say this is they say it's like a gut feeling, or this inner voice. Something was telling me. Little bird told me. Something was telling me it. I had a gut feeling. It's described in many ways, but essentially what it is something that always points towards the truth, towards righteousness, towards evolution. So that is the conscience, and this pertains to the subtle intellect. In fact, the conscience is a part of the subtle intellect. Now, when a person is following a virtuous life, that subtle intellect is more available. The voice of the conscience is more audible, as it were, as opposed to somebody who is following a vindictive life, only doing negative things, pursuing their desires, getting caught up in the senses. For them, the subtle intellect is hardly audible. They don't hear it at all. It's there, they don't hear it. So, the abode of Brahman lies in Satyam, truth. And that truth is being able to follow not only your conviction, but that conscience within you. To thine own self be true.
Yo va etamevam vedapahātya pāpmānamanante svarge loke jeye pratitishthati.
Indeed, he who knows thus knows this. Having completely destroyed sin, is established in the boundless supreme realm of experience. He is established. Pratitishthati, pratitishthati. Established. It repeats twice. This is a clear indication Upanishad is over. That's how the Upanishads conclude. Repetition, as we discussed. So when he says, he who thus knows this, this refers to the previous mantra. Foundation is Tapaḥ, damaḥ, and karmaḥ. So that has its limbs in the Vedas, that abides in truth. This is what is referring to as this. Having understood thus, having known thus, having known these practices, the abode of Brahman, having completely destroyed sin. Sin, again, in this context, sin can be referred to as that stain. The stain, we give that word vasana. So when you have completely destroyed the vasanas, in other words, you have completely eradicated the last desire within your personality, then and only then are you established in the Brahman. He refers to it here as the supreme realm of experience. When the last desire, vasana, in the context sin, is destroyed, then you merge with the self. Then you become that enlightened being. You realize your true identity. Merge with the totality. Become that reality, that truth. Brahman you are.